Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's call with Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. During tonight's event, we'll be taking questions from constituents like you. If you have a question, please press star 3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. You can also sign up for our newsletter by pressing star 6 at any time during the call. So again, press star 3 to ask a question and star 6 to subscribe to our newsletter. And with that, I'll turn it over to Congresswoman Dean. Congresswoman, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Dirk, for that kind introduction, and good evening to everyone tuning in at home. It's good to be with you. I'm Madeleine Dean, Congresswoman for our 4th Congressional District. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge my colleague, Representative Sylvester Turner of Texas, who tragically passed away this week. I continue to pray for his family, his loved ones, and his hometown of Houston, where he was beloved. God bless, and may his memory be a blessing. Last month, I hosted a telephone town hall on February the 6th so that we could come together, so that I could hear your voice, your concerns, your fears, your confusion. We had on that night for an hour more than 8,000 people join us. So I thank you to those of you who joined us, and I'm glad you're joining me today. Because in these first 45 days of the Trump administration, we have seen more than 200 executive orders and actions, a flurry of actions, retractions, and actions again. Federal agencies gutted, research funding cut, foreign aid slashed, federal workers fired, sometimes rehired, tariffs on, tariffs off, inflation up, stock market down. And just this week, we heard the president's joint address. Sadly, 2 hours of division, misinformation, lies, and fear-mongering. Yet it was a celebration for my Republican colleagues, and that is puzzling to me. I felt an obligation to attend out of respect for our institution, out of respect for the office of the president, and to speak the truth. I sat there for most of it. I have to admit, I walked out after we welcomed home Mark Fogel. I was happy to cheer his return after working with my Pennsylvania colleagues, his own son and mother, for years to bring him back to Pennsylvania, back home alive. Yet after that, I walked out because I had heard enough of Donald Trump's grotesque claims of supporting our law enforcement while pardoning violent January 6th insurrectionists, highlighting a beautiful child who had suffered cancer while slashing cancer research funding, celebrating farmers while instituting tariffs and slashing markets, which will make their products harder to sell abroad. All the more reason to host town halls like this one, because what we are seeing is not normal. I feel an obligation to be in regular contact with all of you, a more urgent feeling that we must all be in this together. On our last call, I laid out 3 pathways to understand how I am combating all of this, how I'm dealing with it, and how Democrats are fighting back. We're doing it in 3 different ways. In the courts, through litigation. In Congress, by legislation and through our power of oversight. And in the community, citizens like you and me, that's where you come in. My office, 3 offices, have received hundreds of calls, emails, messages, and constituents stopping in to share their concerns, their statements, and their questions. They're worried over mass layoffs. They're worried over Elon Musk's access to your data, my data. They're worried over the dismantling of our institutions. And they're very concerned about the treatment of a president at war in Europe. So much more. First of those 3 categories in Congress, we are conducting robust oversight, holding field hearings, press conferences, and bringing American stories to light. House Democrats have also introduced legislation, the Taxpayer Data Protection Act, the Department of Education Protection Act, the Protect Veterans Jobs Act. I hope some of my colleagues in the GOP will prioritize the concerns of their constituents and join me in supporting these bills. And shouldn't our first priority be passing a responsible budget, not a patchwork of temporary budgets, not a government shutdown looming in just a little more than a week? in the courts. There are more than 100 lawsuits that have been brought forward challenging Trump and Elon Musk's illegal orders. I'm sending out a legal update every week, and I encourage you to visit my website and sign up for my newsletter at dean.house.gov. Thankfully, courts have blocked some of the executive orders, including Trump's attack on birthright citizenship, the federal funding freeze, USAID funding freeze, and DOJ's access to Treasury data. And once again, I want to take a step back to what we saw earlier this week. Republicans in the House and Senate displaying a total obedience, cheering on a president's lies, disinformation, and callous bigotry. That's where you come in. Our community of engaged citizens. We must be in this together. And I know in the calls that I received, you tell me we are in this together. I'm encouraged by the power of your voices, and tonight I will do my best to answer more of your questions. I have to tell you, as Dirk will tell you, we've had nearly 200 questions submitted over the last week, and we'll hear some questions live as well. So Dirk, I send it back to you. Let's begin.
Yes, ma'am. So we've got an online question to start us off. This comes from Carolyn and Tom in Fort Washington, and they're asking, can Trump/Musk legally alter Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid? And what are the safeguards to prevent this from happening?
Well, Carolyn and Tom, hello to Fort Washington, and I thank you for the question. This is a question that's been asked over and over on the phones and emails to me. Legally, no. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are congressional programs. They are set up by law, signed by a presidents of the past, for these benefits. Hard-earned benefits, I might say. I think about Social Security and the number of seniors in my district, the 4th Congressional District, Montgomery and Berks counties, who count on Social Security, who count on Medicare for their health care, and Medicaid for additional support for health care, for in-home benefits. So the fear and really what the budget proposal that was budget proposal resolution that was put forward and agreed to by every Republican but one, and every Democrat voted against it, would require us to slash Medicaid, Medicare, and potentially hit Social Security. It will not be legal. We will fight it. And I would think the Republicans would be hard-pressed to touch Social Security and Medicare. But watch what they're doing. The deception is in this. In the budget resolution that was passed last week, it calls for a minimum of $880 billion to be taken out of Energy and Commerce Committee spending. $880 billion. That's a floor. There is nowhere to go. If you cut everything else out, you'd have to still cut more than $600 billion from Medicaid. And so when the Republicans try to say, no, we're not touching your Social Security, your Medicare, or your Medicaid, it is false, because that is where large spending occurs. And really take a look at the other side of it, because in that budget resolution, what they never talk about is that they require increased spending, increased deficit spending by $4.5 trillion. That is entirely to get tax breaks to the very wealthy, to the largest of corporations, at the expense of Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare.
So here's another online question, Congresswoman. Peg is wondering, what is the best way we can support you in your efforts to protect our democracy?
Hello, Peg. That is one of the very frequent questions I get when I'm walking in a supermarket or on the street, getting a cup of coffee. Do what you're doing now. Be engaged. We need citizens to be engaged, to recognize that this is not normal, that it is not appropriate that a president and an unelected Elon Musk are dancing around our data, are slashing budgets, are cutting off aid, foreign assistance, aid that we provide to some of the neediest in this world. It is not normal. We have to protect really the rule of law and the co-equal powers of government. Think about it. The president and Elon Musk are putting out order after order after order that actually changes what we in Congress passed and presidents have signed. We have the power of the purse. If you read the Constitution, and I wish the president would pay attention to it, it is Congress that has the power of the purse. The president, what he could do is put forward legislation to do these deep slashes and see if he can get it passed. In the meantime, we will have to count on the courts, and I really count on the courage of citizens. Get involved, go to meetings, pick an issue that you care desperately about. Maybe it's our veterans, maybe it's our kids' education. Work on that issue with other like-minded folks, and I am confident that it is going to be the contagion of the courage of ordinary citizens like you and me that's going to protect our democracy and turn away this grotesque attempt at autocracy.
Do you have a question on your mind? If so, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Again, please press *3 if you have a question for Congresswoman Dean. Now we've got Jody joining us on the line. Hi, Jody. You are live. Go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, my husband and I are both disabled. I haven't had an income for about 8 years since I got sick, and my husband at this point is wheelchair bound and bed bound. The only income we have is his Social Security and his VA disability. If they go after that stuff, if they cut it, even if they only cut it temporarily, we're going to end up out on the street. So what backup plans do you have for people like us while this is being litigated?
I thank you for bringing me that question, Jody. What service did your husband serve in?
He was in the Navy for 11 years. He did 2 tours.
I have 2 older brothers who served in the Navy during the Vietnam War. My eldest brother, Bob. Go Navy. I'm with you. Please tell your husband and you, thank you for your service to our country. What you describe in terms of the possibility of you losing the benefit that you have earned at your time of extraordinary need is completely unacceptable. So I will continue to fight to make sure that never happens. I'm sure you saw some of the news coverage that there was a private memo or an internal memo they're calling where as many as 80,000 employees of the VA would be slashed, canned. And yet the Secretary of the VA says, and that will not impact veterans' benefits, health care, medical care, psychological care, immunizations, etc. That is nonsense. It is un-American. Today on the floor, I chose to speak to this very issue. We have to stand up for our veterans. It is the only American thing to do. So I and my colleagues will fight to make sure your benefits, your husband's hard-earned benefits, as he served our country to protect the very thing Peg just asked me about, our democracy, our freedoms, are never cut. And I hope, Jody, you will call in, email into my office so we can stay right with you and serve you as our constituents. I'd be proud to meet you and your husband.
So now we're heading out to Lansdale, where we've got Deborah joining us on the line. Deborah, you are live with Congresswoman Dean. What's your question?
Representative Dean, I really appreciate what you and your colleagues are doing, and I know you're doing everything that you can legally, but what happens when all of the legislation that you bring up is not passed because the Republicans won't vote for it? What happens when all of the court rulings against what Trump is doing are ignored by Trump? What is it, and all of the phone calls to all of the Republican senators and representatives are just ignored, or they just turn their phones off? What is the next step?
Deborah, thank you. Hello to Lansdale. And you're asking really smart questions. You're absolutely right. Let's talk about legislation. We are in the minority. Democrats are in the minority, both in the House, in the Senate, and of course, the executive is controlled by Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Doge. And we have seen that they have no appetite to pass any of the simple pieces of legislation that I just spoke about. So I don't have any crazy rose-colored glasses that we're going to be able to pass legislation to do the right thing, to do the equitable thing, to get things moving for the American people, not for the billionaire class. Where I do have greater hope is in two places. Number one, the courts. I was just on a town hall last night with a professor. It was Chrissy Houlihan, Representative Houlihan, Representative Mary Scanlon and I, and a professor who is an expert on the courts. And this same question came up. The courts have great power. The courts have the power to enforce their orders. So I hope it won't come to that. We did hear Vice President Vance and President Trump suggest that maybe they would just ignore court orders. But the courts have vast power, A, to determine what is correct and what is legal in terms of what the president has done. Many of these actions are simply unconstitutional, and they have the power to enforce. I was happy to see the Supreme Court yesterday. You saw that one of the cases bubbled up to them, and the Supreme Court told the Trump administration that they must pay out at least $2 billion in aid that was frozen for USAID's work already incurred. So we have courts who are recognizing lawlessness and law, and I hope this administration pays attention to those court orders. Otherwise, they will be enforced against them.
So for everyone that's joined us online for this evening's call, please press *6 on your telephone keypad and get yourself subscribed to the Congresswoman's very informative e-newsletter. Again, during this event, you can get signed up to receive the Congresswoman's e-newsletter by pressing *6. Now we're heading out to Springhouse. We've got Tom on the line with us. Hi, Tom. You're live with the Congresswoman. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Congresswoman. First of all, thanks for accepting my call. I'm going to be completely transparent. I am a moderate Republican. I am embarrassed that the party of Lincoln has turned into what it's turned into. I've never voted for Trump in an election or in a primary, and yet we're stuck with him. I've already made phone calls and sent emails to both senators as well as yourself stating this has got to stop, and what can I do as a citizen in order to slow it down, if not stop it? I think you've already answered that question, but you might want to reinforce it. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you, Tom. That's exactly what I thought. I hope on this call, we have more than 1,300 people on here already. I hope there are more people like you, Tom. I represent you. I count on moderate Republicans to be in this fight with me because you recognize what's going on here is just a wrecking ball approach to our government. This is not about finding waste, fraud, and abuse. We'd all like to do that. We're looking for it. We do oversight regularly for that. But of course, all the inspectors general were dismissed, or top inspectors general. Tom, what you can do is exactly what you just did. Be engaged and call to the Republican members. I have colleagues in Pennsylvania, Republican members, who are cheering on this wrecking ball approach, which is incompetent. They are firing people, for example, who guard our nuclear weapons. They're firing people who were examining X-ray machines for safe usage and many other things. So I really am proud to talk to you, Tom, and I'd like to talk to more of my constituents like you who get that this is not what we wanted. As you said, you didn't vote for Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump was elected. We know that. He didn't get more than the majority. He did not get a mandate. So two more things that we can do, all of us. Vote every election. We have an election coming up this year. It may not seem very sexy, but it's about a lot of judges, retention of Supreme Court judges, retention of Common Pleas Court judges, new judges running for Common Pleas Court. I said that there's so much of this that's going to come down to the courts. I hope everybody gets out there, stays civically engaged, speaks out against the lies and misinformation, speaks out against this wrecking ball approach of incompetence and arrogance that is so full of conflicts for greed, frankly. But bring more people to this fight. And I really appeal to Republicans. I bet this isn't what you signed up for. I don't recognize this Republican Party, and we need a healthy Republican Party. I just simply don't recognize it. But elections will make the difference, and we will get somewhere with the help of everybody. So thanks, Tom.
Taking another online question now, this one from Lisa, is asking, what are you and the Democrat Party doing to protect public education, specifically the needs of special education students?
Lisa, I thank you very much for your question. I believe the days are blurring together, but I believe it was today that the president early on said that he was going to be signing an executive order to eliminate the Department of Education. That is the Federal Department of Education. That may sound like a very strange sentence to say. It sounded strange coming out of my mouth, but this is something that the president is keen on doing. You know where he got that notion? It's something he's believed in for quite a while. It is the notion of get rid of the Department of Education, privatize it for profit separately. I have here with me Project 2025, and I wanted to just point out, there's a chapter, page 319, it's about a 900-page manifesto. Page 319, the chapter is entitled Department of Education. Mission, the very first sentence reads, federal education policy should be limited, and ultimately, the Federal Department of Education should be eliminated. Eliminated. I note that many of our states receive a lot of money from, a good deal of money from the federal government for education. As you know, states make up the bulk of it along with our tax dollars, real estate, property tax dollars. I'll also note that in the reddest of states, they get more federal dollars for education. I find it extraordinary, paradoxical, that elected leaders would want us to not have a Department of Education. Why is that? Is it possible they don't want an educated electorate? An electorate that can critically think, decide right from wrong, truth from lies? I think that's sadly part of what it is. And to your point, our children have to be protected. We have to make sure that we can continue and grow the programs for all of our children, whatever their needs are, whatever their learning behaviors are. And so for special education students, for students with disabilities, students with special needs, students who are just excelling and need more, I fought for as a state representative and here at the federal level, more money for education, appropriately spent, equitably spent. Donald Trump and those in his administration want to eliminate the federal government's contribution to education, sadly, because A, they don't want our children educated, and B, they want to privatize it for profit.
If you have a question on your mind that you'd like to ask during this live call, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Again, you want to ask a question? Press *3. Next caller is Mark. Mark, you are live with Congresswoman Dean. What's your question?
Good evening. Hello again. I met you when you ran the first time. I was a neighbor of yours, although you didn't know it. I used to live on Roslyn Avenue behind the VFW.
Oh, hi, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, I graduated in '71, so I was ahead of you. So anyhow.
Are you still in Glenside?
Well, no, I live in Limerick Township, but I was on active duty for about 16 years. So I lived all over the country. And then I worked at the base in Willow Grove as a government contractor. I worked at Picatinny as a government contractor. So some of the things that are going on, I've seen it with my own eyes. I mean, I've seen the waste. I've seen people in positions that basically didn't have enough to do. In fact, at Willow Grove, Congress had passed a law several years ago to assess whether outside services could provide the same services cheaper. And they lost their supply, refueling, and other things there because they had too many people. And I saw people sitting at their desks with nothing to do. And where I was working, we were hired as contractors. There wasn't even enough work for all of us. And the government employees were there. They didn't even know how to run their computer network. It was a mess. So I've seen the waste. But the thing is, the way they're going about it is not the way it should be done. And as far as the oversight, this is what has people frustrated. the oversight, we're not getting down in the weeds and seeing that the things that the services we're trying to provide are actually being provided. And I'll give you one last example. My uncle died a few years ago. He's a World War II veteran. So I'm putting together a case with his medals, but he was missing some. So I looked online, and you can request them. The government will supply them for free. So I did all the stuff online for my cousin, sent it in. She gets an email. She gets it back saying they got it. No medal. So she calls the phone number, and the person says, I'll be out of the office. It's October. They're still out of the office. I said, go to your congressperson in your area, and maybe they can help you. They give her the same number, get nowhere. So I got the medals from the company that makes them, Vanguard. That's where I got them from when I was in the service. And they told her they're out of stock. I said, well, why didn't they order them? I said, this is why I was going to do that in the beginning. But I said, let me see if it'll get done. So what's happening now is an extreme reaction to what's been going on for years. People want to see Congress do something. That's why they had BRAC, because Congress wouldn't shut down facilities that weren't needed. This is the extreme reaction to what Congress wasn't doing. So somehow you got to talk to your folks on both sides and say, look, if the people want this done, we need to do it. But they're using Musk. That's the cover. See, the Republicans are using this as cover. Where have they been all this time? They don't want to do it either. So that's my comment and question to you. What's Congress doing to make things more effective? I'm not seeing it.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thanks for your service to our country. One of my brothers, my late brother Harry, worked at Willow Grove Naval Air Base back in the day as a hydraulics mechanic. Thank you for your service. And you know what we could have done, what we should be doing, is asking people like you who were working there within the program, whether you were working as a military person or as a contractor, help us find that which is wasteful. That's what we could have been doing. That's what you would have thought Mr. Trump would want to do. Expertly go in and do audits that actually show exactly where the waste is or where the redundancy is, and if there's fraud and abuse. There's something very troubling to me about Mr. Musk going in without interviewing anybody, without doing any analysis, and also with $38 billion worth of contracts with the federal government. The man is extraordinarily conflicted in the work that he's doing. So what could we have done? Should they have done was to actually, in a methodical way, a planned way, in an audit that is not just a wrecking ball, they should have taken a look and to see where we could find more efficiencies. We do that. But as I say, when you have an administration that wants to get rid of these inspectors general who do this very same kind of work, we can see what their motivation is. The motivation was not to do this with any kind of transparency. We yesterday had before us the acting director of USAID. We asked him, what's your method for shutting down USAID, for shutting down payments for work that has already been done, for shutting down life-saving food to countries in need, by the way, grown by American farmers in many cases. They had no methodology, none. But he said we could look forward to, in the future, radical transparency. What nonsense. So what do we do, to your basic question, what do we do to push back on DOJ and the incompetent, chaotic way they are going about this? We have to sue them in court, and that's what we are doing. Show that what they are doing is unconstitutional, it is illegal, it is against the laws that we have passed, the funding that we have appropriated, because that's our job. It is not Mr. Musk's, and I believe the courts will prevail. But it's going to be very, very painful in the meantime, and that's my worry. Who gets hurt in the meantime? So thank you again for your service. Thanks for the question.
So our next question is from Kate in Lansdale. Kate, you are live on the call. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi there. Thank you for hosting this evening. So I have a question about resources and news sources. It is so difficult to be able to tell what is actually a five-alarm fire and what is not important at all. Obviously, that's one of the tactics that Donald Trump and Elon Musk and all of them, that's one of the things they're doing. And it's working very well because it's hard to understand. It's hard to see what the actual stories are and and what level, to what extent they're going to affect everyone. And specifically curious about, what newspapers we can rely on, or journalists or Twitter accounts, anything like that is pretty much honest and doesn't spin things. I know that might be asking a lot, but I'm just curious what your opinion is, and what are the things that you read every day or you go to every day?
Well, I thank you. There are a few things that I do read every day, and I share your concern. Number one, it is a flurry, a blizzard of chaotic actions by this administration. Think about it. We're only 45 days in. And I don't know if you're like me. I wake up thinking, okay, what happened overnight? And I'm still trying to deal with what happened, for example, 1 week ago, the disastrous meeting that we saw and heard with our own eyes of the president and vice president berating, yelling at a president at war, President Zelensky, who just wants to ask for our continued support to get them to peace, to get them to save lives, to protect the sovereign territory that is Ukraine against Russia. In that case, what helped there is we had the video, we had the words, we could see what took place. But I share your concern. Number one, how do we hold on to that which matters and not be hair on fire every day? So I have to be careful about that and pick out the important things. That's why I raised the meeting with Mr. Zelensky in the Oval Office. It's very important that we recognize the harm that did to our standing in the world. I read New York Times. I read the Philadelphia Inquirer. I read other local newspapers, particularly on issues that I care about. We look to the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal talked about Donald Trump's tariffs. The editorial board said it was the dumbest tariff policy that they'd ever seen. So when somebody like the Wall Street Journal tells you that, it's something to note. But I am worried about our media. And I also look at, there's some terrific writers in The Atlantic, for example. I also read historians. I take a look. What does John Meacham see in this? What does Beschloss see? What does Doris Kearns Goodwin see? What can we learn from history to see a barometer of what we are struggling through right now? But you're right to be worried and to be worried about our media, because that's another corrosive thing. You saw that the Washington Post, the owner there, has curtailed that which will appear, the subject matter that will appear from their editorial board, curtailing issues that can be talked about. That's a very dangerous place. We need a robust, independent, free press. We need people to use their First Amendment rights to tell us the truth. And I'm very skeptical of places that do not report the truth. I was there on January the 6th, and yet I saw news outlets, so-called news outlets, not report the beating of police officers by American citizens using Mr. Trump's flag, using the American flag. And we had whole news agencies saying that didn't happen. We have Republican members who said it was just a normal tourist day, telling us not to believe our own eyes, what we saw, what we heard, what I smelled, what happened in that place. So keep looking for the truth. Pick the issues that really matter to you, because we cannot drink from this fire hose of indecency and illegal, inappropriate actions. We have to hang on to that which matters and check your sources. I used to teach writing, and I would tell my students, you have to make sure that your sources are double checked, peer reviewed. And so I try to do that so I don't get fooled. Any one of us could get fooled by misinformation and lies. And part of my job is to make sure that I'm only talking about the truth. So thank you for your concern. And it seems to me you're already deeply engaged. So we're in good hands there.
I'd also like to mention there's another way to get reliable information, and that's to get subscribed to Congresswoman Dean's e-newsletter. You can do that right now by pressing *6 on your telephone keypad. Again, get truthful information by getting subscribed to the Congresswoman's e-newsletter by pressing *6 right now. Now, we received this question next. It's from Justin in Bluebell, who asked what are you doing about the White House's proposed budget?
Thank you, Justin. Hello to Bluebell. How are you? Well, we're in a real crunch. As you probably know, Justin, we have until next Friday, the 14th of March, to pass a budget or to pass what's called a continuing resolution, meaning a short-term budget. We are 5 months, I guess, into this fiscal year without a proper budget, just operating on a continuing resolution, a stopgap budget. I would have thought, Justin, that this administration would come in and say, number one, folks, before we do anything else, let's get our fiscal house in order by having a proper budget for this fiscal year. They didn't do that. And instead, what the Republicans have put forward is a budget that guts Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or would attempt to, and inflates the deficit by $4.5 trillion in order to prepare tax cuts for the wealthiest corporations and the wealthiest people. I will never support that. Something I'm very happy about is this Congress, I was asked to serve on the Appropriations Committee. So I'll be watching the budget close up as a member of the Appropriations Committee, because that is the power of the purse. That's Congress's job. We have in this next 10 days, we have the Republicans and the Democrats, Rosa DeLauro is the ranking member on our committee, negotiating what we will do so that we don't shut the government down, so that the Republicans who have the majority don't shut the government down. So it is my hope that in those negotiations, a reasonable budget will come forward that protects all of the things that we're just talking about that are being slashed, harmed, fired by DOGE, and continues the appropriations and holds the executive to account when he attempts to slash those appropriations. But I am fearful that the Republicans do not have the votes or the will to pass a reasonable budget that reflects our values, that protects hardworking American families, not just balloons a deficit. Literally, $4.5 trillion is what they want to add to the deficit. And that's on top of the $2.5 trillion that the Trump first administration increased our deficit by with tax cuts to the wealthy. So I'll be standing there vigilant next to Rosa DeLauro and Democrats to get a reasonable and sound budget, but I'm very fearful because we're on a path that makes no sense. And I think about it for the business people out there. This is no way to run a government. You have to know what your budget is. You have to know so that you can plan, what you are buying, what you are selling, who you are hiring, who you are training for the future. This president is got this crazy tariff set of policies that are on and then they're off, making it very, very difficult. You saw the jobs report, 172,000 jobs lost last month with this administration. So I'll be fighting for a reasonable budget, and I hope we find partners in both the House and Senate Republican conferences that want to do the same thing.
Thank you to everybody who's joined us for this live telephone town hall with Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. If you have a question you would like to ask, please press *3 on your telephone keypad. Next up, we've got Quinn joining us from Fleetwood. Quinn, welcome to the call. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hello. One question that I ask myself and I wonder about is, how did we get here? I speculate that the Supreme Court ruling on Citizens United and unlimited money in politics and political action committees has played a role. I am curious to hear your viewpoint on my speculation, and I am curious to hear what the Democrats are doing to prevent this from happening in the future.
Thank you, Quinn. I appreciate the question. It is a question I've been asking myself for a lot of years. I've been here in Congress 6 years. I was 6.5 years in the Pennsylvania House. But before that, I was asking that question as well when I was a teacher at LaSalle University. How did we get here? How did our politics get us to this point? You're right to look to Citizens United, the Supreme Court case that allows dark money, unaccounted for money, to come into campaigns. And when I say that, For example, I have very strict rules about what I can raise and from whom I can raise money, and strict levels. But we know that so many of these campaigns that we just saw in this last election cycle are fed by millions and millions of dollars to these third parties who are influencing campaigns, putting up millions of dollars of commercials, many of them not based on the truth, because the Supreme Court said that's protected speech. It's okay. That shouldn't be. What we have put forward is, number one, Citizens United should be rejected. And I wish a Supreme Court someday in the future would say that actually this kind of dark money is very poisonous to campaigns because it is misinforming the voters. What else has happened, though, is take a look at the Supreme Court itself. The Supreme Court operates with no guardrails. We have seen 2 Supreme Court justices receive money, gifts, forgiveness of loans to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars without even filing reports about these things. You take a look at Justice Clarence Thomas, received a luxury motor coach, $269,000 luxury motor coach from a friend, a wealthy friend, and he got a loan for it to pay back the wealthy friend, who, by the way, had work interests issues before the Supreme Court. When that wealthy friend said, you know what, it's a gift, you don't have to pay it back, what do you think the Supreme Court justice did at that point? Did he account for it? Did he put it on his financial reporting? No. And he said, oh, I missed it. If you and I got such a gift, you know what we would be in trouble for? Income tax fraud. That was income to him, $269,000. And yet there, Supreme Court justices sit receiving trips and gifts so inappropriately, so unethically, so in conflict with their oath of office to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. So what we have put forward are serious reforms for the Supreme Court. Shouldn't they have a code of ethics that they have to operate by? Every other judge and justice does at lower levels. I'm a lawyer by training. I have a code of ethics that I have to abide by as a lawyer. So the Supreme Court needs reform, and we have multiple pieces of legislation, and with Jamie Raskin and Hank Johnson and others, we have those kinds of things to move forward. It's not going to happen in this Congress with Republicans who are just complicit and they don't want to see any of that. We need to reform Citizens United. But we also need people running for office who are willing to stand up against the corruption and the lies of this administration. How is it that some of my Republican colleagues sit silently as the president puts forward misinformation and lies? How can it be worth it to them? I don't understand it. How can they vote for things that really go against their callings, whether it's a faith-based calling or the callings of their constituents? I don't understand it. So yes, we need campaign finance reform. We need reform for the Supreme Court justices so that we can trust their work again.
So I think it is worth noting, Heather from Elkins Park and a dozen other people are asking about federal workers. And Heath wrote, I'm a federal employee who's afraid for my job and the future of civil servants. We are hardworking, dedicated people who feel vilified by the current administration. Congresswoman, what is your advice for the civil service servants of your district?
I'm worried too. Heather or Heath, I'm not sure I heard what the correct name was. And what I would ask of you and anybody on this call or any of your friends, family members, or whomever, go on my website or call my office or email into us, stop in, tell us your story. I am confident, I am certain that it is with authentic stories of my constituents. I'm worried for your job too. Tell us your story. Tell us what is going on with you, what notices you are getting, whether it is to resign, whether it is to report every Friday 5 bullet points of what you are doing. I want to know what's going on with you so that I can chase it down, so that I can hold the folks that run these offices, who run these agencies, or who are working with DOJ to take you out of your job. I will fight for you and your jobs. So I ask you to please share your stories with me. That's what I want to do, is just follow you in the extraordinary work. I had a letter from a mom and a daughter-in-law, and the daughter-in-law is a civil servant. She's very proud of the work she does. She's an engineer, and points out the obvious. She could be making more money on the private side, but she loves her work. She believes in civil service. She believes in working for the government, for all of us. And one of the things she decries, and I decry it with her, is that civil servants are so disrespected by this administration and by DOJ. That stunt of Elon Musk holding up a chainsaw, a glammed out chainsaw, as though civil servants are some sort of dead wood to be chopped off. I will speak out against the disrespect, the disinformation, the lies and slander about you and every other civil servant. Please tell me your stories, and I'll be there next to you to fight for your job.
We're going back to the phones. We've got Judy on the line with us now. Judy, welcome to the call. You're live with Congresswoman Dean. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Madeleine, it's Judy Moss from Lower Moreland. It was good
Hi,
to
Judy.
see you briefly Saturday. 60 years ago this year, I entered the nursing profession and got my RN. It was a very different type of medicine then because it wasn't for profit. And then we got this guy called Richard Nixon, and when Ted Kennedy couldn't come to a meeting, come to grips with him to get universal health care for our citizenry, Richard Nixon got in bed with Kaiser Permanente, and they created HMOs and told doctors they could only spend 10 minutes with their patients. And then we had Jimmy Carter, who finally came out with a brilliant plan to get rid of the housing of the mentally ill in places like Byberry and Norristown. And he wasn't reelected because we know what went on with that little scandal. And then when Reagan came in, he closed them, but he didn't do the second half of the project, which was to get them in community living and get them support. So now they live on our streets. Now we're not even going to have research to cure cancer in children or Alzheimer's, which is a plague in our country. I take care of Alzheimer's patients. I'm retired a year and a half ago from real nursing, but I help out friends and watch their moms so they can go to the movies. And I don't understand to be able to look at my new granddaughter to wonder what hell she's going to go through if, God forbid, she gets sick with something. And we have this decimation of research and development in the most important thing we own, which is our health and our families. How do I wrap my mind around this?
Well, Judy, it's good to hear your voice. I share your grave concerns. Number one, thanks for the many years of nursing service that you provided so many, and now on a volunteer basis in our community. I'm gravely concerned about health care. I'm gravely concerned. You remember Donald Trump in his first administration was trying to get rid of the ACA. I think they tried 50 votes or something to get rid of it. The budget proposal that the Republicans are putting forward would, in essence, have to steal from Medicare, Medicaid deeply, and ACA. That is some of their ambition. They don't share your belief that we all have a right to health care. They do not share it. If you didn't understand that morally, economically, they're making a big mistake, because we know that when somebody does not have health care, they wind up sicker with worse outcomes and costing a lot more money going into ERs. The thing I'm worried about with Medicaid is a misunderstanding of how vitally important Medicaid is to my constituents. Millions of Americans, but millions of folks in Pennsylvania alone rely upon Medicaid. You were talking about helping people who are retired. Medicaid helps seniors stay in their homes with in-home care, in-home services. like you are voluntarily providing. Medicaid helps, I think it's something like 60% of our seniors who wind up in nursing homes. We try to keep them in their homes as long as it is safe and possible. And then they have to transition to nursing home care. It is Medicaid that helps them in that way so that the family doesn't have to try to figure it out without any health care protections. Children are supported by Medicaid, 60% of children. Folks with disabilities. In Pennsylvania alone, Medicaid covers 100,000 of our citizens who are being treated for addiction, for the disease of addiction. So this administration doesn't care about any of that, doesn't care about our seniors, our children, our disabled, folks who are dealing with addiction, trying to stay alive and then to get into the joy of recovery. This administration does not care about that. It does not care about health care because guess what? They can pay for whatever health care they need and they'll protect their kids and their grandkids. But that doesn't do it for you and me. Like you, Judy, I have grandchildren. I worry very, very much about what their future holds. I want them well now. But to your point about research, take a look at the slashing of research, the stopping of research for pediatric cancer, the trying to block EPA from doing its job regulating the poisons of chemicals that are getting into our environment that even the president in his speech the other night said probably poisoned a child that he was lifting up. We have to reject this style of leadership. And I don't use that word to mean that I admire it. We have to reject this. We have to continue to fight that every single one of us has a right to health care, physical health, mental health, not just the very wealthy among us. So elections matter, and speaking up, telling your story matters. I think about, I'm hearing from folks in the VA, and they're gravely concerned about the stopping of trials, health trials, and research. So I'm with you. I'll keep fighting. We have to all be in this together. And I do believe we will prevail. I don't think this kind of cynicism and corruption will prevail, but it's going to take all of us.
Now, Suzanne in Douglasville submitted our next question. She's wondering, are there any lawsuits pending regarding the USAID money being completely cut off?
Yes, thank you, Suzanne. Absolutely, there are multiple lawsuits. And if you go to my website, you can take a look. I'm a part of this litigation strike team where we're just compiling all of the lawsuits. We don't file the lawsuits as members of Congress. Outside groups, nonprofits, agencies themselves, people who are being harmed file the lawsuits. But we are tracking all of them, and there are pending lawsuits. Just yesterday, one of them reached the Supreme Court, at least in part reached the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court rejected Donald Trump's cutoff of USAID and said you must pay out the $2 billion in funds that they had already spent. And I want to say something about USAID. I have seen their work up close and personally. And I had the chance yesterday to try to question, though it was a closed hearing, no media, and actually I was cut off from asking a question by the chairman. USAID does extraordinary work to feed the hungry, to keep children from starving. The PEPFAR program, started by, credited to George Bush, saves millions and millions and millions of lives from HIV. It's all at risk. I just had some nurses, speaking of nurses, I just had some nurses in my office this afternoon who have family in Ghana, Nigeria, and they're fighting for PEPFAR and that funding. So there are multiple lawsuits about USAID and the extraordinary work they do. They're partnered with World Food Program, Cindy McCain, UNRWA, in feeding the children, the families in war-torn Gaza, thanks to Hamas's horrific terror attack on Israel. They're feeding children all over the world, and yet that money has been cut off. Aid to field hospitals in Gaza that was provided by USAID, appropriated by Congress, has been cut off. And I asked the director about that. He denied that that had happened. Funding for a hospital in Jerusalem that takes care of Christian and Muslim children of this war, cut off. And USAID director denied it. There are multiple lawsuits. As I said, go on my website. You can see the status of those lawsuits. We're going to keep them going and protect. I pray that we will protect the good work of USAID.
So it looks like we have time for just one more question, and that honor goes to Michael in Conshohocken. Michael, you are live with Congresswoman Dean. Go ahead now.
Hi, how you doing? My question is there any subjects that you can come into agreement with Trump or the Republican Party? I mean, I just hear that you walked out on them, and is there anything that you guys can agree on?
Yes, and I thank you for that question. I would love, that's why I went to the speech. That's why I went to the swearing in for his second inaugural. I want to show that I'm there. I'm available to work with him. And I want to tell you, there was one thing that the president pointed out that I'm very proud of, that his wife, Melania, is supporting me on. I have a bill called Take It Down. And he even pointed to the First Lady and her work in this area. And so I have said, I am so thrilled to be able to work with the First Lady on Take It Down. It is to hold platforms available to take down images, terrible images of usually girls or children that is often used, we call it revenge porn, that can be altered through AI. It has devastating impacts on our young people or on anybody who is the victim of it. And so I put forward a couple of Congresses ago the bill Take It Down. Melania and the president apparently are in favor of it, so I'll be working with them. I'm very happy to do that.
So, Congresswoman, as I look at the clock, we definitely need to begin to wrap up this live telephone town hall. So I'd like to call upon you for some closing thoughts, please.
I just say, Dirk, number one, thank you to you for always handling this so well and so professionally and getting everybody, as much as we can, a chance to get your questions in. Continue to please give me questions. I want to let you know we have more than 3,000 people on this call tonight, so I'm deeply grateful to you for being engaged, for asking the questions. Republicans, Democrats, independents, no affiliation. I have the privilege of serving the 4th Congressional District. And these are not normal times. And so I won't sit back and act as though they are. I will stand here with you to uphold the rule of law, to protect our democracy, to protect most of all your family, your children, our communities from real abuses and things that are very, very harmful. I do want to say thank you. Please continue to share your stories. I want to be a part of the solution. And I know that the way to do that is to continue to do my job in Congress, to count on the courts to uphold the rule of law, and to count on all of you to speak the truth with me so that we will uphold our democracy. It's my privilege to be with you tonight, and I'll do more of these.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for your time today. And thanks, everyone, for joining tonight's live telephone town hall with Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. Now, if you haven't spoken to a member of our team yet about subscribing to the e-newsletter, at this point in the call, please stay on the line, and at the sound of the tone, spell out your name and email address slowly for us, and we'll get you signed up to receive the newsletter. Thank you again for taking part in this important call. We hope you stay healthy and safe and have a wonderful night. Goodbye, everyone.